Hey everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski taking a look at one of two Grade 1 races on Saturday at Belmont Park. Race 8 is the Grade 1 Belmont Oaks, going the mile and a quarter distance on the inner turf course for three-year-old fillies. Field of 9 signed on for this race, Craig. There are a couple of European shippers, though. I think they're going to be a couple of the bigger prices, unlike in the male version of this race, the Belmont Derby. The established favorite in here is likely to be the number 1 Mission of Joy. She's just done nothing wrong in her turf starts, and one could argue that she should actually be undefeated on the turf because she had a pretty tough trip in her one loss. She's the horse to beat, but there's quite a bit of talented three-year-old fillies in this field.
Right. I don't think this field's any walkover by any means. I think there's some other talented fillies in here, and I expect Mission of Joy to run well, but I expect the same for some others as well.
Yeah, Chad Brown has a couple in here in Prerequisite and a Spray. We've got horses that are stepping up in class into Stakes Company. And like I said, those two European shippers. So a lot to weigh, a lot of factors to weigh in this race. So let's take a look at the Time Form US Pace Projector to at least get a sense of how the race might be run through the early stages. And no surprises here, Craig. I think just based on the way that she's been ridden in recent starts, you would have to expect that the number 5 Prerequisite is going to go to the front end. She's been successful using that running style, or at least was last time in the Wonder again. And when you go through this field, there just aren't too many other front runners in this race. So it feels like she's going to have things her own way on the lead.
Yeah, this is one of those rare scenarios where I think even if they didn't want the lead, they're going to get it by default because, as you said, none of the other horses are really front runners. Mission of Joy, who's shown in second, has shown some tactical speed in the past, but she seems like a horse who wants to do her running in mid-pack as well. So I expect Prerequisite to be all by herself on the front end.
Well, let's go through some of the contenders, and we'll actually mention every one of the 9 runners as we go through this field in post-position order, beginning with that 2-1 morning line favorite, the number 1 Mission of Joy. And like I was saying, she has just really turned her career around since getting on the turf in her second career start. She's basically done nothing wrong since then. And that one loss back in the Edgewood, she was pretty unlucky that day. Minorly clipped heels and upper stretch, had a ton of traffic to deal with, had to alter course. And there's an argument that she would have won that race with a clean trip. She came back last time, got a much smoother journey in that Regret Stakes to beat her main rival Papilio, who also finished behind her in the Edgewood, despite the fact that Mission of Joy had that trouble that day. She's just rock solid, Craig, and she's bred to get the distance, being by Kitten's Joy. There's some stamina pedigree on the dam side, especially going to the second generation. So she just makes a whole lot of sense, and she drew a great post position.
Yeah, I have no knocks on this filly. As I said, I fully expect her to run a good race. She draws a good inside pace, post position. She showed last time she was able to stay close up to what was a really quick pace, and it didn't seem to phase her. She held off the closers easily that day, so she's clearly the horse to beat.
The number 2 is Strikingly Spun. Let's take a look at her last race when she actually faced older rivals in an optional claiming N2X allowance race going a mile and 3/8. So she's one that's actually cutting back in distance to tackle the mile and a quarter here. And Craig, I thought she held her own pretty nicely against some older rivals with a bit of quality. You could see she forges to the lead in mid-stretch here after stalking a moderate pace and just gets run down at the end by Parnack. But the form of this race has since been flattered because Parnack came back to be third in a grade 3 in her next start, and the 4th place finisher came back to win at a similar level next time. So based on the last race, you can argue that Strikingly Spun fits against this field at a big price.
I'd agree with that. I mean, she's a filly who you don't often see 3-year-olds do well this early against older on the turf. It's more a successful move on the dirt in those allowance races. So I thought it was a good effort. She's going to have to improve a little bit speed figure-wise, but not a ton. And as you said, she's already shown she can handle a longer distance.
One of the European shippers in this race is the number 3 horse, whose name I'll pronounce Sperling Beag. I think that's how it was said in one of the Irish replays that I watched for her. And Craig, this is a horse that I think is just going to have to improve a little bit. She showed some talent last year when she was a winner over males in a Group 3 event at Leopardstown that was going 9 furlongs over soft going as a 2-year-old. So you would imagine now that she's a half a year older, a mile and a quarter over firmer ground is not going to be much of a problem. She did face some decent horses early in her career. She traded decisions with a runner named Lumiere Rock, who was recently second at Royal Ascot in the Group 2 Ribblesdale Stakes. I just didn't love her lone start as a 3-year-old in France. She didn't do much running that day, and now she's coming off another layoff, is switching into the barn of Grand Motion.
Yeah, I couldn't get too high on this one. As I was watching her replays, I wasn't all that impressed. And as you said, she didn't do a lot of running in the last time out. She's a filly who, if she were shipping over because, she was getting first-time Lasix because maybe she bled, it would be a different story. Obviously, that doesn't happen anymore. So for me, I wasn't able to find a whole lot I liked about this one.
Yeah, I should note she was actually privately purchased at auction, I should say, by Gainsway and the connections, and switched over with a plan to switch over to Grand Motion back in December. I think she was purchased at a December auction for, I want to say, upwards of 300,000 American dollars. So they probably had some intentions at that time to eventually send her to America. The number 4 is Papilio, and we already talked about her a little bit with relation to Mission of Joy. She just hasn't been able to beat that rival in 2 consecutive starts, despite the fact that Mission of Joy had more trouble than she did in the Edgewood. And then last time at the Regret, she was held up in traffic a little bit at the top of the stretch. To my eye, it didn't look like she was ever reeling in Mission of Joy that day, though she did finish with some good interest when she got into the clear. I think the biggest positive with her, Craig, is that she's finally learned to run straight, because when she first came over to the U.S., she was having a lot of issues lugging in badly in the stretch.
Yeah, she was lucky not to be disqualified in her win at Keeneland back in April. I did think she ran better last time, as you note. I still think that habit's just a little bit there, and maybe that got her into some trouble as she wanted to get in and got blocked a little bit. But she does have some run when she gets clear. I wonder if she's totally over it, and I suspect at a short price, she might find herself in some trouble again.
Up next is that likely pace setter, the number 5 Prerequisite, and we'll take a look at her last race when she won the local prep for this, the Grade 2 Wonder again, going 9 furlongs on this same inner turf course. And like we said, she did so in front-running fashion and is able to hold off another rival who's coming back in this race, Be Your Best. And I thought both of these runners got pretty good trips, Craig, though Prerequisite did set some honest fractions on the lead. I think a few of those pace figures are actually color-coded red, and she's able to hold off the late charge of Be Your Best in the late stages. I think the big question for Prerequisite is whether she can be as effective going the 10 furlong distance.
I would agree with that. And I forgot to note it with Mission of Joy. It's similar for Prerequisite in that they both come out of very fast races. They were actually knocked down a little bit by Timeform US because that fast pace probably enabled them to run a faster time than you would otherwise expect. But for a horse that was on the front end, that's not really a bad thing. I think the distance is a question. However, the fact that she's going to be alone on the front end can kind of allay some of those concerns.
Yeah, I will say, watching her last race, this horse does not strike me as a natural front runner. Flavien Prat really had to get after her coming out of the starting gate to make the lead, and then she relaxed from there. Irad Ortiz, that's not so much his style to hustle out of the starting gate, so I'll be interested to see if she's ridden as aggressively. But like you said, she might just fall into the lead because it doesn't feel like too many others in this race want to be in front. As for the horse that finished right behind her last time, the number 6, Be Your Best, she finally got back on track because she had shown some real quality earlier last year and promise, winning her first couple of starts impressively. Things sort of went off the rails a little bit, but I think that was primarily due to the fact that she had some difficult trips. The Breeders' Cup was just a disaster. She got caught in traffic, and then she was really wide to back in the Appalachian. She ran much better last time when she got to close into that honest pace. She's another one, though, Craig, that I think we have to still determine if she can be as effective going 1.25 miles.
Yeah, it's a concern. And that speed figure last time, I think, as opposed to Prerequisite, I think it's one that really, she had a great trip given that fast pace set by that one. So I don't want to overrate the ground she was gaining late because of the pace, but she was doing it, and she's one, if she gets a similar setup, she could be right there at the wire. I just wonder if that can happen with the lack of speed.
Up next is the other Chad Brown trainee, the number 7, Asprey, who I'm starting to think might attract a lot of support in this race. I pegged her at 6-1 on the morning line, but the more I look at it, I might want to switch. I would have preferred to switch her morning line with Papilio, perhaps, and make Asprey the second choice, because it just feels like this undefeated runner is attracting a little bit of steam coming into this race. And I get it, Craig. I mean, she's done nothing wrong in 3 starts so far, and here she is closing down the field to win the Hilltop last time at Pimlico. She's a daughter of Quality Road, who's out of a European family, of a Galileo dam. So there's definitely pedigree to suggest that added distance is going to be right up her alley. My problem with her is that race last time, it did fall apart a little bit. And the other horse that was closing with her that day, Breathaway, she came back to disappoint in her next start.
And yeah, she's not the only one. Other horses in that race have come back to either run very similar or worse speed figures, and it wasn't that strong of a race speed figure wise as it was. So it was one that we knocked down a little bit because of a fast pace, and the Pimlico surface was a little tricky, but at a horse who's probably going to take some money, as you noted in the beginning when talking about her, it's too big of a jump for me to latch onto a low price.
The number 8 is Freitas the Red, a horse who's coming in from Kentucky, just off a maiden victory. But this is a horse that has shown some quality at different points in her career. I remember taking note of her last summer at Saratoga because I thought she had run some sneaky good races behind some good maidens, including when she lost to Free Look at her second start, coming with a big late run that day to finish well clear of the field. Things sort of went awry at the end of the season. She maybe needed to start coming off the layoff, but her last race at Churchill Downs was seriously impressive. I mean, she always traveled like the winner of that race. And once Brian Hernandez Jr. guided her into the clear in mid-stretch and wasn't able to do it that expediently, he had to wait until about the 3/16 pole to find a clear path for her. But once she saw daylight, she absolutely exploded away from that field and was flying through the wire. And just looking at her pedigree, Craig, being by a Saxon warrior who's from the Deep Impact line, from a German dam side pedigree, the dam's a half-sister to a horse that was a Group 2 winner going a mile and 3/8 in Europe. Just feels like added distance is supposed to be right up Freitas the Red's alley.
As opposed to Asprey, who we just talked about prior to this one, she's going to offer a lot more value. She has a lot of the similar things. She's lacking the high speed figures we've seen from some others, but she's going to be probably 4 times the price of what that one is. And she also was much more visually impressive, as you know, drawing off the win by over 4 lengths. And had they won another furlong, the way that one looked, it probably would have been 10. She was just that impressive. So of those last 2, I would much prefer her.
And then rounding out the field is the number 9, Aspen Grove, another runner that's shipping in from Europe for this. And Greg, this filly's a bit of a difficult call because if you're just looking at the company that she's kept, she has faced the best fields of anybody in this race. I mean, meeting the likes of Tahira, who is now a 3-time Group 1 winner in Europe, Meditate, who was so impressive, winning the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf last year. They finished ahead of her last time in that Irish 1,000 Guineas. She even met Blue Rose Sen at the end of her 2-year-old season when that one was a winner of the Marcel Boussac, and she's since come back to win the French Oaks. So, I mean, Aspen Grove has met some really good 3-year-old fillies in Europe. The problem is she wasn't really competitive in those races. And looking at the ones where she was successful, I find it a little hard to get that excited about her.
Those are my thoughts exactly. When you just ignore the races where she wasn't competitive, you're looking at basically 2 Group 3 races. One, she was able to win as a maiden at 66-1. So you have to wonder about the strength of that field. And then she was 25-1 when she finished an okay third. But I mean, when I watched the replay, I wasn't all that impressed. So I just wonder if she won't take a little more too much money at the betting windows just because she's a European shipper with some of those names in her company lines.
Yeah, and the other thing about Aspen Grove is when you watch all of her European races, she goes back to last place every time and tries to pass the field. That could be a difficult trip to work out in this Belmont Oaks that lacks much speed. Well, let's throw up our top picks for this Belmont Oaks. And Craig, you're going with that speed horse, the number 5 prerequisite. I really can't blame you. She's supposed to get the right trip in this race, and she was definitely appearing to be moving forward last time when she won that Wonder again.
Yeah, I just couldn't get over when I looked through this race how little speed there is. And like you noted, I don't think she's a filly that has to be on the front end. She was urged that way last time, but I have a feeling she's going to make the lead pretty easily and not set fast fractions like she did last time. I read Ortiz. He's not my favorite rider on the front end, but when he does get one like this that has shown some good reading ability, I think she'll be fine and will offer some value.
Yeah, I've been a fan of hers. I've got her in the mix. I think we both acknowledge that the number one Mission of Joy is a legitimate favorite, and she's the one to beat in this race. We both have her in the second position. I'm going for a much bigger price with the number 8, Freitas the Red. I've just had a thing for this filly, and I really liked the way that she finally broke through last time at Churchill Downs with that huge late kick. She's supposed to really relish the 10 furlongs of this race, and she's going to be the right kind of price to find out against a field that I'm not so afraid of anybody outside of Mission of Joy. So I'll put the number 8, Freitas the Red, on top, and Craig going with the number 5 prerequisite in the Belmont Oaks on Saturday at Belmont Park. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.